Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Box, again with Dr. Ronald G. Taylor, sponsored by Novo Dia. And also want to just really say thank you for all the support and feedback that you've given us around these conversations. We try to keep them as authentic as possible. I'm a retired superintendent with about 30 years of public education experience that includes being a teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and also superintendent. And for those who are interested in reading some great stories about careers that are interesting and about the fight for instructional and educational integrity and equity, you can also feel free to look for my book. It's The Courage to Lead with Integrity for Equity, an authentic educational equity journey that's available everywhere. There's also, of course, a link on my LinkedIn. Welcome back to Beyond the Box. We're so happy to have another episode to share with you today. We're lucky enough to have Kristen Hardy, the Executive Director of Special Education for Vallejo City Unified School District, where she oversees a department dedicated to improving educational outcomes for students with disabilities. With over 20 years of experience, she is deeply involved in ensuring that the district's special ed practices align with its core instructional vision. Hardy serves as VCUSD's Title II, ADA, and Section 504 coordinator. It really indicates her crucial role in legal compliance and equitable service provision. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
We're so excited to have you here. As a former superintendent, I did a lot of work around special needs and IEPs and compliance and making sure that all of our students are getting what they're supposed to be getting to be their very best academic and socially emotional performing. And so, when thinking about your journey, um, what did IEP kind of struggles and noncompliance and disproportionality look like when you first stepped into this role?
I've been in this particular role only just over a year. So when I joined the district, I think post-pandemic, the landscape has really changed for special education. We've seen nationwide, but particularly in California, where I am, a dramatic increase in the number of students being assessed for special education and then those qualifying. And I think, trying to maintain and in a time when we have many professionals leaving the field. And so, short staff and increasing numbers of students are leading to a lot of challenges for districts to maintain compliance.
I think an underreported challenge. I know for us during the pandemic and after the pandemic, the number of parents who really wanted their students assessed for perhaps out of district placements was a big challenge for us. And then there were a lot of parents who were really frustrated in our circumstance with not being in person in the buildings, and so the out of district placements were in person, and so there were that was a new challenge for our district, and I definitely echo that. I know that building inclusive and high quality programming with instructional materials for students in this population can be a challenge. And so, with you being there only about a year or so, I know you're early in that journey, um, but is there a way that you're is there a way that you're envisioning a way for to ensure that special education students' materials are connected to that core curriculum that governs the entire school district?
Absolutely. I mean, we're doing a lot of work around that. I think, part of the challenges coming back from the pandemic as well are just increasing amounts of anxiety for students and difficulties being on comprehensive campuses that year, depending on where students were developmentally, had a significant impact on their ability to have what was kind of pre-COVID social skills, communication skills, executive functioning skills, self-regulation skills. That's really shifted, and we're in a very different landscape, educationally and trying to meet those needs. And I think, often, as this is kind of a new area and new challenges as educators for us to be facing. Our students are coming to classrooms with different readiness skills, right? They're not coming with the skills that we could assume before was typical. And that goes across all grade levels, right? So, the pandemic really had impact across all ages in different ways, but it's still changing the landscape of how students are coming back to the classroom. And I think, there just are an increasing number of students who are really struggling to be on a comprehensive campus at all and to be in a general education setting. And so how we're meeting that need, that kind of those base, um, the kind of the base of the pyramid, right? Safety, social, emotional regulation, um, is a new opportunity as educators, to be rethinking how we're constructing our classrooms and kind of the frequency of touch points with the adults, right? In having supportive adults. And those are things that special education is kind of renowned for, right? We have smaller ratios, smaller classrooms, more focus on and opportunities for regulation and breaks and things like that. That's kind of just built into that, baked into the DNA of what special ed is. So I think that's one of the drivers, I think. Plus, to your point, um, just smaller educational settings in general and parents utilizing that special education identification as a way to seek these alternatives to the traditional comprehensive campuses, as being, I think, just part of what I really see. And I've had a few leadership experiences in different districts in the Bay Area. And because we are a single district, what we call SELPA, Special Education Local Plan Area, I am in a tight group of about 180 other SELPA directors from around the state. And so, we're talking about a lot of the kind of current trends in education. And this is statewide. And I know that, this reflects national trends as well. But, back to your question around how are we ensuring access, for Vallejo, just within 1 year, by simply saying we're, we are going to have every single student in our district exposed to high quality, board adopted, state adopted core curriculum. Right. So our extensive support needs students, there's a separate state adopted curriculum that is more designed to meet their learning needs in all core areas. But then our mild moderate students, no matter where they are in that continuum, from a special day class to, to a resource to speech only, they are in the core curriculum. Their teachers are being trained in the core curriculum. That curriculum may be adapted to meet their needs, but they're going to be in the core curriculum. We are not utilizing alternatives. We're choosing, robust core curriculum and then ensuring that all of our teachers across the board are trained in delivering that.
What a commitment. That is phenomenal, and I know, I've had previous guests, who were special educators, and I always say that the line to heaven, right? The first people in line are the special educators and then the kindergarten teachers. And then and everyone else comes after that, right? Because of the level of patience and the commitment to vulnerable, students who maybe only have you as in the group, as their advocate. So phenomenal answer. And one thing that I'm always fascinated with is how districts address students who are twice exceptional, right? Students who have been identified as special education with a disability of some sort, but also gifted and talented because of their abilities academically. Have you had any experience with that in Vallejo or elsewhere?
Yes. And I think, so a lot of my work in special education leadership has actually been at the secondary level. And I think at the secondary level, it is a little bit easier, right? Because if districts commit to master scheduling that is really starts with your specialized populations, your English language learners, your students with IEPs, right? And you build a schedule that allows for that period by period scheduling. If you have a student who and we see this often with our students on the autism spectrum, right, where they may have tremendous strengths in the nonverbal subjects like math, for example, but really need more support with English or history, even to the point of like needing, a smaller or more sheltered setting for that. But, you can put that student into whatever level of math is appropriate for them and then provide those accommodations that allow them access to that course while also them, giving them an English class, a history class that's at, that matches their skill level and allows their goals to be addressed.
That's always fascinating for me, without the risk of um, someone knowing what student I'm speaking about, and want speaking a little bit more generalities. But I remember having a family I was supporting as superintendent that I was meeting with, and they had a student who they thought really could be enrolled in the highest, most rigorous mathematics courses, but but the student had a physical disability that was challenging for that environment, right? And so, working through that and understanding, that both circumstances could exist together successfully, was a challenge that I was just so happy to see end up in a successful place. So kudos, and I agree. For those who've worked with me before, they've heard me say this many times, that the importance of the master schedule as you just described, right? The master schedule is the central nervous system of the secondary schools, right? If you wanna if you wanna have a smooth school year, you start off with that master schedule fully intact, fully developed. Everyone knows where they go, when they go. And if you have to do a transfer here or there, it's fine. But if that thing is not in good shape, oh, it's chaos for everyone, right? So I agree 100%. And the last question here, again, your own personal journey, how has that shaped your approach at leading change and kind of discussing curriculum and making sure that curriculum is at the highest level of expectations for students, regardless of their IEP designation? Have you had anything in your personal journey that kind of leads your philosophy on that?
Absolutely. I started as a school psychologist. So, assessment to me is really the foundation, right? That's where you build that sort of portrait of a learner, and you strong, robust assessment built on multiple measures and really looking at that student from all perspectives, getting the input from the parent and who is that student at home? What are their strengths at home? What are the parents' priorities? Um, the student themselves, no matter how young they are, getting their input and who do they see themselves to be as a learner? What do they see their strengths to be? What do they see their challenges to be? I'm I am always blown away by how uh, aware our students are of who they are. And if we give them a chance to articulate that, they will tell us what they need. And almost always quite accurately. And then obviously teachers through interview, through observations, looking at curriculum-based assessment, how are students responding to the instruction in the classroom? And then obviously, juxtaposed more standardized measures that kind of, compare students against broader metrics, whether that be the statewide testings that you're really looking at the criterion-based references, how are they doing on every standard? And then, just more generally in terms of those foundational skills, and then, wrapping that around with strong assessments in other areas, cognitive, speech and language, if that's appropriate, motor, just really getting that robust understanding of who the student is as that foundation, to then beginning to build out that individualized plan for the student, right? First, and I think an aha for me as I've moved into leadership and spent more years here is the clear juxtaposition between, the assessment portion and like, does the student meet one of those 14 eligibility criteria versus the second question, do they require special education and related services in order to access, right? That difference between what's that tweak of the learning environment? What are those accommodations that can be created that sort of match that student's learning style, right, to support that access? You were speaking about the student with the physical disability before. We have so much technology now to provide access and remove those barriers to learning, right? And that, we need to really look at that and how can we support that student to be in that robust grade level classroom and be able to benefit from that, because we know that students do better when they're in that setting. And then if they do require special ed, what are the specific foundational skills that they are missing to help them then be able to access that general ed setting with less support, right? So you're kind of closing those gaps, if you will, while you're still giving the student maximum access, based on their profile. And so I think um, really working with teams to understand that process and to do that with integrity every single time so that every student has that customized roadmap. That IEP becomes that roadmap, right? The assessment is the story, the IEP is the roadmap. And when you get those two things together, that is a powerful tool for change. And then I think, beyond that, one of the things that we did in Vallejo this year, and it was actually a very quick switch, which was remarkable. So our high school graduation rate went from 67.5% for our students with IEPs last year to 93% in 1 year. And we did that through two very focused ways of using curriculum to support instruction across the range at the secondary. And so one was, really implementing that core curriculum for our extensive support needs students. California, this is the first year that California required the alternative pathway to the diploma for extensive support needs students. And so, giving them that access to a high school diploma, so powerful. Just to watch, parents in IEP meetings, like literally crying because they didn't think their child could ever earn a diploma. And now, they were going to walk across that stage and get that piece of paper. And then in our mild mod classrooms, really switching the focus from working on individual IEP goals and kind of worksheets, right? And, what is traditionally has been the trap, if you will, with special education classrooms, right? The kids kind of just churn trying to learn the same skill again and again and again. And by high school, they're so demotivated. They've worked on those things for years. They're not seeing rigorous curriculum. We're holding them back because we're saying, well, you're not meeting this goal, so we can't move you on. But this year in our mild mod classes, we did co-teaching in English and math. So we brought in the grade level math teacher and a grade level English teacher to work alongside our special ed teachers. And it was so powerful. So we let them self-select, which is important with co-teaching. And we gave them a lot of release time and support to kind of co-develop curriculum. And we talked a lot about how much can you unpack and still say that students are meeting the standards, right? So we really calibrated across our two high schools to come to an understanding about what that meant. But to walk through our Math 1 students, it's all special ed classroom. We're sitting in the classroom of a teacher that teaches pre-calculus. So all around the walls were, pre-calculus equations and formulas. And these kids are sitting in that classroom, just soaking in that environment and then really getting access to algebra, geometry, statistics in a way that they could access. And just to see the change in the level of engagement and the belief in themselves, to see those parents sitting in IEP meetings blown away that their kids were passing integrated Math 1, and to see the general ed teacher so excited that, like, every time I'd walk through that classroom, she'd be like, Kristen, look what they're doing. And she was pulling out student work. And I mean, it was so powerful. And the same in English. And and then to see how that starts to change the conversation and community at the high school, where that becomes contagious, right? So one teacher starts saying, I believe in those kids. They can do this. And so then other teachers are like, oh, if I just give this accommodation, this student can do this. Oh, if I just shorten this work down a little bit, this student can do this. And then our general ed, our resource teachers push in 2 periods every day, and they are doing it by content area. So we'll have RSP teachers that's, are stronger in math, and so they'll push into the math sections, and you literally can't tell who those teachers are helping. They are so smooth in how they flip-flop instruction. If you don't know who's who, you don't know who's teaching the class at any given point in time. And so I think that was so powerful to see that switch. And I think you just you can't go back once you see that. And I've been in a lot of districts who have tried co-teaching, and it can be a difficult thing to start. And I think, so critical is allowing the teachers to choose their partners and to make sure that you are giving a lot of professional development time for them to do that co-planning, so that they really build that relationship, so that they calibrate around, how they're going to teach things, what things are going to be taught, making sure that your general ed teachers really feel confident, like it's okay, I can scale back some of this. They don't have to do every single lesson, right? Like they can still be reaching those essential standards. But so I think for us, that's been a game changer. And it's very cool at this point in my career to see a model that really kind of took off and worked, and to see how the students themselves are responding.
That's a masterclass for us. I mean, I think for those folks who might not be on the special education side, hearing how thoughtful that explanation was, right? You included in there the student voice of choice, right? And um, accelerating the expectations, and students rising to the occasion, with their modifications. That's what it's all about. I mean, and I think that having adults who are instructors, who become partners, and giving them some power in that selection of who their partner is going to be, it really helps to motivate them and give a little more oomph to the process, right? Then they don't feel as though they're being talked down to or assigned per se. There's some self-selection going on, and that works well for any of us. So I usually end with the equity question because my book was around um, you know, equity and having the courage to lead with integrity, equity. But I think you just did that. That last story and the outcomes. More importantly, how kids are already doing better in their graduation rate, and families are emotionally connected to the acceleration that they're seeing, and kids sitting in environments where literally what's on the walls is having an impact on them. That's a great way for us to end, and we really thank you for giving us a few minutes, and it's great to hear about your success and your team's success in Vallejo. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Special ed kids are general ed first, and we
Yes,
have to, I think, always work from that perspective. But
great way to end. Thank you very much. Thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.